Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Jordan and Scala Engineers 45L tax credit presentation. We're very excited about the presentation today because we really do believe it's going to be of value to you. So what is the 45L tax credit? Well, the 45L tax credit has been around for quite a while, but it's been revised recently by the U.S. Congress. They have folded this new bill where basically it's the Inflation Reduction Act, and they put this 45L, revised it, and put it into this package. And so what does it mean for all of us on this call? Well, this revised tax credit is a direct benefit to multifamily developers. We know, and everybody in this call is aware, that developers are experiencing a lot of struggle with cost premiums, expedited delivery costs due to supply chain, labor costs, and much more. So our goal today in this webinar is to educate everybody in this call about the details of what you have to do to earn this tax credit. And so we're here to walk you through this process. So a few housekeeping items. One, the attendee microphone, the chat, and the video has been disabled on everybody. So as far as the webinar processes go, please use a Q&A box for all questions. The Q&A box is located in Zoom at the very bottom of your page, and it should have, looks like two little clouds. And that's where you want to pick to submit any kind of questions that you have. We will be monitoring all questions as they come in, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. So we look forward to hearing some great questions from you. As far as copyright notice goes, this is for individual use only. We put this together specifically for this group of people who signed up for the presentation. We were happy to get with you, and we can share this information with others that you know and others in the industry. So happy to help with that. Who am I? I'm the moderator today. I'm Andy Smith. Many people on this call probably already know me, but let me introduce myself. I've been at Jordan and Scala for about 30 years. I began my career in Atlanta, Georgia, our headquarters, where I was there for several years before I helped launch the Charlotte, North Carolina office. About 20 years ago, I moved to Dallas, Texas, where we have now grown it to an office of over 100 people. And we have spun offices off in Houston and in Denver, Colorado. And for many of you, you may not realize it, but about maybe, if you knew me really well, about 18 years ago, I had a passion for sustainability. I got my lead AP, and I kept thinking there's got to be a way to bring more value to the construction and design, especially design kickoff meetings, by having a separate group of sustainability experts. And so today we have a national presence. So a recap of who are we? Jordan and Scala, we're a relatively large firm. We were founded in 1953, and we're recognized as an MEP giant. We offer MEP consulting services. So we do the things that make buildings work, as you know, lights, bathroom plumbing, you name it, air conditioning. But what a lot of people don't know about Jordan and Scala is we offer other services like low voltage. We provide communication, security, and audiovisual service design on multifamily and commercial projects. Another service we provide is the emergency responder radio coverage, the ERRC, that a lot of cities are starting to adopt. It goes all the way back, I think, to 2009 National Fire Code. But we are great at being your go-to for low voltage. And of course, today we're talking about, you're going to be hearing from our sustainability experts. So on sustainability, we do things like energy modeling, green program administration, commissioning, testing, like multifamily. We do duct tightness testing, blower door testing, mechanical ventilation testing. So there's a lot of things that we do as a company. So when you put all these together, we are truly a one-stop shop to offer you a lot of services and minimize the number of contracts you have for sure. So in the upper left is Mike. Mike is who I call the sustainability client solutions guru. He's the one that if you're a developer or an architect, he'll inform you about best options for energy code compliance and sustainability programs for your specific project. And he's awesome. You'll really enjoy working with him. James Brower, He's a recognized leader in over 15 years in sustainability, architecture, construction, engineering. He also has been a professor. He's instructed students at University of North Texas, UNT, for several years on sustainability. So we're really fortunate to have James as part of our team. And he now leads our sustainability group. He is what we call a senior manager of sustainability, and he oversees our team and leading our national presence. So let's begin. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much for that. Going very well. Hello, everybody. Really happy to have you with us today, and we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. So we're going to start with a little disclaimer. So the IRS hasn't yet updated the requirement to apply for the new 45L tax credit. One of the existing credit, detailed energy analysis, certified and documented by a licensed professional to demonstrate that your building met the required energy standards. Units or homes leased or sold in an open tax year would qualify, and you'd claim a credit for each unit or home that qualified during that year. So based on that requirement and information that we've been able to gather from Energy Star's website, we are confident that the new format will require confirmation of Energy Star or Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home certification to apply for the credit. But until the IRS provides definitive direction, we can't be 100% sure. So as Andy said earlier, the 45L tax credit has been around for some time. It's existed since 2006, and it's designed to reward multifamily developers, investors, and home builders that develop energy efficient homes. It most recently expired at the end of 2021, but the Inflation Reduction Act has retroactively extended the existing credit through 2022, and it's modified it starting in 2023, with the updated version now being locked in for 10 years. So under the old requirements, to qualify for a $2,000 per unit tax credit, an eligible dwelling had to be at least 50% more efficient than the 2006 IECC benchmark, and that was difficult to comply. So under the revamp credit, Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready Home certification is the requirement, and larger credits are available if you meet prevailing wages, which we'll touch on in a minute. Another change is that it now covers all residential properties. So mid-rise and high-rise projects will now be eligible, and the restriction for 3 stories or less above grade is no longer a requirement. The final point is it's a one-time tax credit, not a tax reduction. And we do recommend that you talk to your tax professional before deciding how to move forward. So the most important question that everybody asks is, well, what can we get? What's available? So for single family for rent certified as Energy Star, you can get $2,500 per unit without having to meet the prevailing wage requirements. For single family for rent certified as Zero Energy Ready Home, you can qualify for $5,000 per unit, again, without the prevailing wage requirement. Multifamily is a little bit different. So certified as just Energy Star, you get $500 per unit. With the prevailing wage, you would get $2,500 per unit. And for multifamily certified as Zero Energy Ready, you would get $1,000 per unit without prevailing wage and $5,000 per unit with the prevailing wage. So it really is a great incentive. So what do you need to do to meet Energy Star? I'm going to pass you over to James Brower, and he will let you know.
Thanks, Mike. We thought we might first start with a general idea of what Energy Star is and its goals, and then dig into some specifics. So first off, Energy Star, to be able to be certified, you need an energy model with on-site visual verification and performance testing. Energy Star, whether it's for certified appliances, products, or even dwelling units, they always have a goal of wanting to be 15 to 20% more energy efficient. So with the stuff set in place, this will help increase the utility savings of your tenants and could fit into a good, strong, targeted leasing message. Now, improvements on what is needed to obtain this 15 to 20%, though, is all dependent on where you're building, what your existing product type is, and what you normally do. What is your existing construction package? But in general, that will always be looking at efficient heating and cooling systems, a strong envelope with modest window to wall ratio, what appliances that you have, and a good solid quality lighting.
Hey, James, we have a question that just came in. The question is, are duplexes and townhomes considered single family? I think that relates to the prior slide.
Yes, there is a requirement to be considered as multifamily that you need 3 units, 3 attached units or more. So single family and duplexes would be considered single family and undergo the Energy Star for single family new homes protocols, and 3 units or more would fall under the multifamily new construction. With townhomes, there is a little bit of a choice set. Maybe it could be the single family, or maybe it could be the multifamily new construction. So additional options are available.
Okay, I got one more question. You mentioned appliances here, and one of the questions I'm reading is, do all the appliances have to be Energy Star to meet the Energy Star certification?
Oh, that is a great question, and one we get frequently. Previous versions of Energy Star, there was a requirement that it was mandatory that your appliances within your dwelling units were Energy Star certified. Under the new guidelines, you do not have to have them Energy Star certified, but it does help for compliance within the energy model. All right, so with Energy Star, you do have three options for the pathway to choose. You can do a prescriptive pathway. It is very clear there's no energy model needed, but it can at times be more expensive since there are no trade-offs with efficiency when you do an energy model. Since it's an all or nothing checklist, you must abide or exceed all measures, and that's where some additional expense can be incurred. Next pathway to identify is the Energy Rating Index. Many of you might be familiar with the HERS rating system. The Energy Rating Index builds upon the HERS raters and organization to be able to do a per unit energy model with some prescriptive requirements for any attached common spaces. Lastly, there is an ASHRAE pathway that utilizes a whole building energy model. Our recommended pathway for people will be for the Energy Rating Index due to some of the trade-offs, some of the simplicities of the process, and again, with some of the standard product types that we see being built today.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
They're asking, is the Energy Rating Index already required on projects without pursuing Energy Star?
What your question person might be asking about is the Energy Rating Index is a compliance option under the residential part of the Energy Code, the 2015 IECC and higher. So by doing Energy Star and following this Energy Rating Index based on your product type and where you're building, this could be a compliance option for your base energy code. So in addition to these 3 pathways, there are also multiple prescriptive checklists for both a design review as well as field verification. All of these things build into a package to make sure that you have a good quality product that is performing as well as can be, saving energy, which leads to lower utility bills for your tenants, hopefully happier tenants. And with the field verification and checks that are involved, it is an extra quality assurance so that we can help identify and spot any issues prior to your tenants getting moved in, which we all know once tenants are moved in, it becomes more expensive and a lot more heartburn to be able to deal with those issues at that time. So if we can check and find them early, it's a win for everyone involved. So now let's talk about some specific requirements. Now let's start with some MEP requirements. Your mechanical designer will need to complete an HVAC design report. This is just a formalized process to make sure that the load sizing and equipment selection is following a specific methodology to, again, try to help ensure that you are getting a system that is operating as efficiently as possible with what the building that you're actually building in its specific location. In addition to those, there are requirements for your bathrooms and kitchens to be exhausted and also to be tested to make sure that they're performing. Switched bathroom exhaust fans would need to be tested out at 50 CFM, and switched kitchen exhaust would need to test out at 100 CFM. Additionally, we want to make sure that there's good quality air coming into the unit. So there are some fresh air requirements with controls per ASHRAE 62.2, and that will also be tested to make sure that that's coming into your unit for good quality indoor air.
Hey, James, we have a question that is relating to this slide. They're asking that they thought their designs for 3 stories and less that they do on garden apartments already already require all of this. Is that true or false?
That is true in most locations. Some municipalities have amended things to that where some of these aren't always needed. But again, and we'll touch upon this multiple times throughout the presentation about an alignment with energy code. So again, with a 3 stories or less product with standard code where these things are needed to be done, then the delta to be able to achieve Energy Star, it makes it much easier.
You just
Because
answered another question, James. Somebody was asking, how does Energy Star compare to other, such as code as a baseline? So that's coming up. Okay, thank you.
and again, it will be a common theme throughout. So bear with us for the repetition. Additionally, for the dwelling units, and one of the probably biggest hurdles that some products have is in relation to the heating system. In most locations, resistance strip heating will not be allowed because they want a more efficient system for your heating needs, which gets, of course, more important in the northern climates where there's much more prevailing heating requirements. On top of this, you'll again see a recurring theme about performance. We want to make sure that within the bedrooms, let's say if a door gets shut, that air doesn't get trapped within those bedrooms. It can get back to the air handler and circulate throughout the dwelling unit. If the air gets trapped within a bedroom, it will push back against any incoming air, which could lead to some comfort issues and tenant complaints. So there's a requirement that there be transfer grills or jump ducts within all your bedrooms. Another performance item is all in-unit bath fans or inline fans that are used. They need to be Energy Star rated and with a maximum sound requirement. Since we're focused on making sure that there's a right amount of air being delivered, no one wants to hear a jet engine sound because of this. So with the Energy Star requirement for a maximum sound requirement will help abet any sound issues. Another indoor air quality measure that Energy Star asks for is a minimum of MERV 6 air filtration that we can certainly pick up and clean some of the air as it's being cycled through.
Hey, James, we have a question. Mr. James, you mentioned that heating is not allowed in most locations, I guess electric heating. What about New Orleans? I have an upcoming project there, and would I be able to do all electric or not?
Yeah, good question. As identified, the requirements they change and they modify, and it's very much dependent upon where you're building, the climate zone that you're in, and what product type. So please make sure to get our contact information and contact us after the presentation. We'd love to talk with you more about your specific need for your specific project.
James, I got one more that just came in about the slide 11. Are these new requirements or have they already been required for Energy Star?
Oh, most of these requirements have been around in some requirement in some way or another for many years. As Energy Star has continued to develop and refine, there have been slight changes or slight tweaks to make sure that the Energy Star is able to be delivered and have good solid performance for what is actually being built today. Let's talk a little bit about envelope requirements. There is a requirement for grade 1 insulation. If you haven't heard this term before, grade 1 insulation is really a grading methodology to evaluate any voids, gaps, or compressions within your insulation. Or certainly from an owner's perspective, an owner is paying for 100% coverage within your wall system and your wall cavities. So part of Energy Star will check to make sure that what you're paying for is actually being delivered. There are also some air sealing measures, which are similar to the 2015 IECC or higher. So this shouldn't be a surprise. If you are building in any of these locations, then you're already used to planning around these measures. There is also a requirement for some advanced framing measures, which we want to make sure that your wall system minimizes thermal bridging. And there are multiple ways that you could do it, but one of the easier ways that people comply with this is through advanced framing. Insulation works a lot better than your wood framing. So the more areas for insulation we can have rather than wood, you have a better performing wall system. Now, while this is relatively easy to do for a 1 to 3 story product, it certainly gets a lot harder as you move up in stories because there we need structural integrity. So the Energy Star allows to bypass advanced framing measures if we get a letter from the structural engineer saying, "Hey, we really can't do this because we need the building to stand up and not fall over." So that is an acceptable pathway through this specific requirement. Lastly, within the dwelling units, we thought we would touch again upon and remind some of the things we've mentioned before about the performance testing that's needed. The blower door test tests the air infiltration or how tight your dwelling unit is, making sure that it's not the air that has been paid to heat or cool doesn't easily bypass and leave the dwelling unit. The same thing can be done with your ducts, with doing a duct tightness test. It has been designed for a specific amount of air to go to a specific room. So ensuring that we have good tight ducts means that it will help identify that that air is being delivered to those rooms. We've already touched upon the bedroom pressure differential test or the pressure relief. Well, we're also going to test that and make sure that that pressure isn't being built up within the bedrooms. And we identified the bathroom exhaust, the kitchen exhaust, and the fresh air that needs to be tested to ensure that it is meeting a very specific quality standard. Let's talk some about amenity areas. So for your attached amenity areas, your insulation levels need to meet or exceed the 2009 IACC. The fenestration in these areas needs to meet or exceed the 2012 or 2015 International Green Construction Code. Now, some people might not be familiar with that, so I've included an example. So your glazed entrance door in Dallas or Atlanta, for in these areas, your door would need to have a U factor of 0.73 and a solar heat gain of 0.25 or less. As you can, if you're familiar with these product types and these efficiency numbers, it's not too stringent and very common with what you might already be doing. Your heating and cooling system in your amenity areas need to have a specific system efficiency requirement that again is dependent on the type of system you're using and the climate zone you're building in. Again, using our example for Dallas and Atlanta, if you are wanting to do an electric system, then you would need to have a 15 SEER heat pump with an 8.2 heating seasonal performance factor. We generally see this in much higher numbers than this, because in your amenity areas, of course, the owner owns the utility bill. So having efficient systems just improves the owner's bottom line for operational costs. Additionally, for your water heating, the efficiency has an efficiency requirement that needs to be met. If it is an electric water heater, it needs to be a 0.93 uniform energy factor. What we see frequently with standard design these days is a 0.92. So when we talk about incremental improvements, this is what we're meaning, switching from a 0.92 to a 0.93.
Hey, James, we have a question about, you're talking about amenity areas that are attached. There's a lot of multifamily projects where the amenity is a detached freestanding building adjacent to a pool. So their question is, what about those type of buildings? Do they also have to comply with the same requirements as attached?
No, and it's a wonderful answer. No. Detached clubhouses, you are free to do as you wish. Energy Star is only focused on buildings, amenity spaces that are attached to where the residential units are. So while we of course encourage and recommend high efficiency systems in your clubhouse, again, to help with your operational costs, Energy Star will not hold you to any standard in your detached clubhouses.
Okay. And James, I got another question that came in with respect to the electric heat. He says, I assume the auxiliary heat in a split system heat pump DX system is still allowed, correct?
That is correct, because we do need that emergency heat. For those that don't know, heat pumps pull heat from the air down to cool temperatures, but there certainly is a point where it's too cold outside to pull heat from. And so in those situations, there is emergency auxiliary heat, this resistant strip heater, to ensure that your tenant remains having a good heating source.
One more question while we're here on this slide. I think it relates to it. It has to do with the water heating. How will this be impacted by pending space requirements of a heat pump water heater? I think you're going to talk about that later when a heat pump water heater is required, right?
Right. As we'll get to later, it is one of the requirements for the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home. With a 0.93, you can achieve these with the normal system without having to utilize a heat pump water heater. Then lastly, in the attached amenity areas, this is where there is a requirement for Energy Star appliances. And with the Energy Star appliances, there is also WaterSense bathroom fixtures. Much like how Energy Star is focused on energy, there is a certification program for water using fixtures that the EPA put together, known as WaterSense. So your bathroom fixtures in your attached amenity spaces will need to be WaterSense certified. Additionally, similar to energy code, you need to have lighting controls, and they need to meet specific lighting levels. So again, that you got a good performing building, but yet at the same time, it is saving energy where possible. Lastly, some additional requirements to identify and point out. There is a special requirement to have a data acquisition strategy. Many programs, many areas, and even investment opportunities ask for energy benchmarking. This data acquisition strategy, of which there's a multitude of ways that you can meet it. I've identified 3 here on the slide, but this data acquisition strategy will set an owner up well for if and when they have to meet any energy benchmarking requirements. Along with that, the EPA does ask that the owner engage in a partner agreement with them. This is a very simple, no-cost process for the owner to engage in, and it also has the side benefit of allowing the owner access to all the marketing material that EPA has developed over the years. So again, that you can fit this into a leasing message and get the most value from your endeavor. Lastly, one of the additional requirements, there is an HVAC functional testing checklist that is required. What this checklist is a formalized startup process to, again, identify, check, and help potentially find any issues prior to tenants moving in. Now, to be able to do this checklist, if it's a simple system of, say, a standard split systems within dwelling units, the installing contractor can do this if they are certified under an HKEDO organization. Lots of words, but just something to be a know about, that there's a functional testing checklist, and this can be done by an installing contractor with a simple system, and just identifying for them to have a good, solid startup process. And with that, I will turn things over to Mike to talk about some of the other advantages with Energy Star.
Thank you very much, James. Yeah, so we're going to touch upon some of these points in more detail as we move through the next couple of slides. But what are some of the other advantages of Energy Star? Well, as James said earlier, it aligns with the energy code. So if your location and your project type dictate that you've already need to do energy code inspections and testing, well, Energy Star just builds on top of those needs. So the price delta to target certification is reduced, especially when it's measured against the potential return. It combines with other above code programs. So if, for example, you're following NGBS or LEED, well, Energy Star can dovetail with those programs, and you can get multiple green certifications for your project. It helps with green financing. So Energy Star is already one of the green program compliance options for some of the primary green financing programs. And with a single certification, you can therefore comply with both your preferred financing option and the 45L tax credit. It fits into a targeted leasing message. Energy Star, it's widely recognized for energy efficiency. For example, we did a little bit of research, and a recent report showed that over 80% of US households report seeing or hearing about Energy Star, and over 50% of US households said that they'd knowingly purchased at least one Energy Star labeled product in the last 12 months. And finally, something that's becoming more important, more prevalent, it meets the GRES reporting for energy ratings. So owners can download their property data from Energy Star's EPA Portfolio Manager, and they can upload that information into the GRES assessment portal for your ESG reporting. So energy code alignment, we've talked a little bit about this already, but just to be more specific, for Energy Star, we have to do duct and blow door testing, and that's also required on 3 stories or less under 2015 and 2018 IECC, although for 4 stories and up, that's not a requirement. There's even more alignment going to come into play with 2021 IECC with the additional of mechanical ventilation testing, which is going to be required for 3 stories or less, and the inclusion of blower door testing for 4 stories and up. Energy models are also going to be even more important under 2021 IECC because if you perform one, you will not need to add energy recovery ventilation per unit.
Mike, I've got a quick question that just came in. So their question is, we have a project that's in Austin, Texas under the 2021 IECC.
Yeah.
And it's a 3 stories and less. Does that mean that I'm not really having to do much more to get, I guess, earn Energy Star?
Yes. In simple terms, yeah. It means that you won't have to do much more. Yeah.
So maybe the only thing they have to do more is the mechanical ventilation, perhaps, or if that even?
Well, that's going to be required under 2021 IECC anyway.
Oh, okay. So there's nothing more in testing that has to be done.
James, can you just confirm?
Yeah, there is a strong alignment between the City of Austin's 2021 IECC and the testing. So therefore, then all that you would need is to ensure that there is visual verification and an energy model. So with those items combined, the end result is that price delta to achieve Energy Star with this product type in Austin is going to be rather minimal.
Okay, so moving away from code alignment for a second and looking at green program align, from the table on the screen, you can see how Energy Star aligns with some of the other popular green programs that are out there. So as we've discussed, Energy Star, it requires an energy model, visual verification and testing, and LEED for homes follows exactly the same requirements. With NGBS, there's no mandatory energy model unless, of course, you choose to follow the performance map, but it does require visual verification and testing follows code requirements. LEED for building design and construction is a little different because that's for properties that are 4 stories and up. It does not require testing and it's predominantly documentation based without the visual verification, but it does require an energy model. Financing, well, as we said, Energy Star is one of the recognized programs for a lot of the green financing that's out there. For the HUD MIT reduction program, it's one of the approved programs. And because it requires annual benchmarking, that can be made less complicated because of Energy Star's requirement to have a data acquisition strategy in place. The Fannie Mae multifamily green financing provides preferential pricing for projects that follow green programs. Those can include BREEAM, NGBS, LEED, and of course, Energy Star. And the Freddie Mae Multifamily Green Advantage, which is focused on workforce housing, that has LEED, NGBS, and Energy Star as compliant programs, and it also requires annual benchmarking.
Hey, Mike, we have a question. Will the 45L and Energy Star both require benchmarking?
They will not. No, Energy Star and 45L doesn't require benchmarking. It just requires you to have a data acquisition process in place and ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And then I just want to finish on something here that is often overlooked. There are lots of utility incentives out there, and green programs can assist with those. There's a multitude of them available throughout the US. And as I say, they're often overlooked by owners and developers. So if you're following a green program, it is important to check out what might be available because they often align with your program requirements. And 2 common examples that we come across are Centerpoint, that's available in the Houston area. They have both single family and multifamily programs. They provide an average incentive of $175 a unit, and they require an energy model and visual verification and provide a bonus for above code programs. Encore, they offer a single family program in areas that they service in Texas. They require both an energy model and visual verification with bonuses for Energy Star certification. And it's another great opportunity. We're always happy to assist in finding potential local utility incentives for you. So please do reach out to us as you're planning your projects.
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to shout out, You talk about the 45L as a great value to the developer, but now you're adding on top of that incentives by utility companies, which is even more helping them get these projects built.
Absolutely.
We just recently did a study I know of where it had 240 units under the 2021 Energy Code. And I think for about $20,000 more out of pocket, the owner was able to accomplish about $600,000 of tax credit savings. So these things all add up to a lot of money over time. So that's great. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, we're very keen to help our clients as much as we can with all of these things. And as I say, reach out to us. We're always going to be happy to help and guide you in any way we can. Yep. So back over to you, James.
And just to finish up on that, all those things that we talked about, that you can comply with all of them. Yeah, you can do Energy Star and get the 45L. You can do the HUD MIP reduction program and get that preferred financing, and you can get utility incentives. So depending on where you're at and what's available, you can really stack everything up for a huge windfall for the owner. We wanted to also identify, since we did talk at the beginning about the Zero Energy Ready certification program, and we touched upon it briefly when we mentioned about the heat pump water heaters. We wanted to give a little bit more information about this because certainly it is a much stronger incentive program, but that also comes with additional challenges. This one certification requires you to get 2 certifications and meet other requirements. So the certifications that the Zero Energy Ready program asks you to get is both the Energy Star, which we've talked about, certainly a bunch already, as well as the EPA Indoor Air Plus certification. So we talked about Energy Star for energy. We talked about WaterSense for water. Well, strangely enough, the EPA also developed an indoor air quality certification program known as Indoor Air Plus. One of the more challenging features of this program that we see in warm, humid climates, it will require systems to have additional dehumidification features to it. Some of the other requirements outside of certifications is it does ask for you to have your HVAC ducts and air handler all within your thermal envelope. We touched upon earlier that have a high efficiency water heating system, which if electric, that does mean a 2.2 uniform energy factor, which translates to needing a heat pump water heater. Since this is a Zero Energy Ready program, we certainly have to look at solar ready requirements, which also means having a specific amount of free roof area on a south facing angle. And you need to build in an area that has a specific amount of daily solar radiation. So that any solar that does get put on can be effective and be very effective in capturing that energy. Just have a little bit left to go before we can get into some of any additional questions and answers, but let's address some frequently asked questions. Certainly, and we touched upon this earlier, we get asked, when can someone earn this credit? And can they get it every year? No, unfortunately, it is just a one-time only tax credit per project, which can be claimed once the project is complete and certified. Now, people ask frequently, how do I, as an owner, how do I prove out the prevailing wages? Well, this is one of those things that we are waiting for the IRS to update the tax codes, and more specific guidance will be provided and available once they do. Hence, also why the importance of checking with your tax professional to make sure that this is right for you if you want to pursue the higher amount with the prevailing wages. The last frequently asked question that we have is, someone has a project that has just completed. Can they get this new credit, or maybe they're just wrapping things up, and so it's going to push into 2023? Well, unfortunately, no. Since the certification needs that on-site verification, which is both a verification of the insulation and air sealing, so features that get hidden by sheetrock. If you have not had these on-site verifications by the qualified professional, then you would not be able to claim the energy or get Energy Star certified, and therefore claim the tax credit. Lastly, we thought that we might wrap up with a summary of the low-hanging fruit. So, as a reminder, the single-family for rent projects with Energy Star, you go straight to the $2,500 per unit without needing to get the prevailing wage requirements involved. So get certified, get the $2,500 per unit. If you're doing green financing, such as that HUD MIP requirement, well, HUD MIP, the HUD loan will require you to comply with prevailing wages. So therefore, not only do you meet your code your loan compliance, but you'll be able to pick up the additional money at the same time through the 45L tax credit. As we've touched upon multiple times, if you are 3 stories or less, or you're in an area that is doing the 2021 Energy Code, well, then many of those code requirements can help offset the Energy Star costs. So your delta to achieve Energy Star is much more feasible, and you maximize the amount of your return. Now, this is just the low-hanging fruit, and so, there might be a question that pops up in the chat about, well, what about 4 stories or more? That's not in 2021 Energy Code area. Well, it's still a good feasible program. There, the idea is that, well, maybe you're looking to get a certification. Maybe you're being approached by your equity partners and saying, hey, we want something. So go out and do something. Well, the 45L tax credit will help pay for what you're being asked to do, or maybe you've been thinking about doing. So this is a great way to be able to get into and do an above code program, be able to market it, get the benefits, and not be hit with as much of the cost. So certainly always looking to talk with people about specific projects. So if you fall into any of these areas, we'd be happy to talk with you more.
Hey, James, we've got a lot of questions here I'd like to get to. They're asking, is testing required on every unit or is it a percentage? My response to everybody was, it's usually a minimum of 15% of the apartment units have to be tested. And on the high end, it's about 25%, depending on what adopted energy code and what the local authority having jurisdiction is going to require. Is that a pretty decent answer for everybody?
That is correct. We will have to balance out the most stringent requirement between Energy Star and the local municipality.
All right. I've got another one here. Is there a pathway to obtain 45L for existing buildings?
There is a pathway, but you would have to undergo more of a deep renovation. You would have to meet all of the requirements for the Energy Star certification to be able to achieve the 45L. And so if you're just changing out a few things, or during a turnover where maybe you want to upgrade the systems, that would not be enough to get the certification. One of the questions that the IRS reached out and was asking for comments on here recently was they were wondering about what questions in relation to existing buildings and renovations would be available. So we expect that once they update the tax code, they will provide more guidance about what can be done with existing buildings.
Okay. We have another question that says, if Energy Star certification received for a community, would it automatically qualify?
I'm uncertain what they mean for Energy Star for a community. Since Energy Star certification is based on a building or a dwelling unit, I would ask that whoever asked that question to please follow up later so that we can be more engaged and I can understand your question deeper to be able to provide better guidance.
Another question that came in is, what is the baseline energy code that you're using?
Most of my information is based off of where the 2015 IECC or 2018 IECC. If you've looked into this and looking for the more technical answer, our answers have been based off of the 1.1 revision 2. There's Energy Star on their website has a map of the US that identifies what program and what version you're under based on your permit date. So getting back to that idea of there's a wide variability about where you're building based on what revision and what version of the protocols that you're using can have minor tweaks to some of these things that we've talked about today.
Would a assembly of more than 3 single and duplex homes on one platted lot be considered multifamily? That's a little different than, I guess they're trying to find out, is there a future project they're working on maybe going to fit into the single family for rent, perhaps? But they're wanting to know what's going to define as multifamily, maybe.
Yeah, well, the protocols identify that you switch into multifamily with 3 attached units or more. Certainly, once you have stacked units, then you become very specifically multifamily. But duplexes, even a quadplex, they could undergo the single-family new homes protocols.
Okay. So if you have three attached or units that are stacking, that would be defined as multifamily.
No, we would be able to. So a three or four. Well, okay, you said stacked. At three or four attached, there's the potential to undergo the single-family new homes, which utilizes then the $2,500 per unit. Once once they start stacking, then we get into the multifamily rule set.
Okay. What is the sun rating on the fan, the bath fan and kitchen fan? Does it even matter for Energy Star?
It does for any of the bath fans or the inline fans. There's different requirements based on the different types of fans. So that's why we just identified a sound rating. Again, if you want more of the technical information, please shoot us an email, and happy to provide those more in-depth answers for you.
I've got, I think, a relatively straightforward question here. To clarify, are these Energy Star requirements that you're speaking of today on 45L tax credit requirements, are they outside of the standard Energy Star certification program achievement through ESPM?
Oh, okay. ESPM probably is the Energy Star portfolio manager.
Right.
So Energy Star is a wide range of things from appliances, existing buildings, commercial buildings, some of the benchmarking criteria that the HUD MIP reduction program identifies. So we are specific. The 45L says do Energy Star single family new homes or multifamily new construction. So those two certification programs are your compliance path for the 45L. The Energy Star portfolio manager can come into play with some assistance of other things, or maybe that data acquisition strategy. But any of the stuff that we're talking about today is more about the certifications and less about the portfolio manager.
Got it. We have one here that is, have we looked at any of the cost studies to compare meeting code versus Energy Star requirements on a per apartment unit basis?
We've looked at some, and we've been engaged in doing some of our own, just so that we know that when we're talking to you, that this is a feasible, doable strategy and what the costs are. Some of the stuff, though, is, again, since it varies so wildly on your product type, what codes you're under, and even where you're starting from, that those are we feel that those are more individual questions rather than a broad overview of just, oh yeah, to go Energy Star is X amount per dwelling unit, since there's so much variability that we have to take into account before we can have that conversation.
And I believe, James, a lot of our projects that we design already have heat pumps on them around the country. Texas, where you're located, often is all electric, but going from an all electric to a heat pump is very negligible amount these days, according to feedback we've gotten from some mechanical contractors in the past few weeks. So it's really become pretty much of a norm to use heat pumps. And I think that's maybe one of the bigger expenses, right? By going Energy Star.
That is correct. It's the first thing we always check is, anybody asks about, well, I'm interested in Energy Star. The first thing that we always look at and ask is, we check into, are you doing heat pumps? What is, where are you at? So that we can address that first and foremost, because that is the biggest expense.
Okay. And I think we have time for a few more questions. We have one here is, have any of the changes to the 45L helped with installing solar power on multifamily projects, making it more affordable?
Well, it's certainly a yes and no. So if you are a project that you're looking for ways to fund solar panels on your buildings, well, there's other incentives out there, whether from utilities or from federal incentives. But let's say that it takes you $200 to meet Energy Star, and so you net $300 for with your 45L tax credit. well, there's no reason that $300 per unit can't be earmarked to pay for the solar panels that you're considering. But unless you're doing the DOE Zero Energy Ready, just for Energy Star, they don't really get into solar panels on its own. So hopefully that answered the questioner was asking about. But again, if not, follow up and happy to provide more details.
Yep, we have a good question here. Can you get a little bit more in detail about claiming the credit? What needs to be submitted to claim it? Will the tax year the credit is claimable be the year of the project start of the year of the CO? I think the question is, when you start a project in design, you all are providing the Energy Star design and requirements. And then once the building gets certified and the project reaches its certificate of occupancy, at the end of the project, that's when they earn their credit. And we provide, or a consultant would provide the developer. The software we use has a tab that you pick, that you print out with the just 445L tax credit, which we would seal and sign, and that would be given to your tax prep person, and then they would submit that to the IRS. Is that pretty much how it goes, James?
For the most part, yes. Since the in the timing, that is correct to the best of our knowledge, and that's where we say make sure to get your tax professional involved, especially once the IRS updates the tax codes to be much more explicit about what will be needed to be submitted and when that can be claimed. But in general, it won't be able to be claimed until after the building is complete, since that is when we can certify the building. And so we will provide detailed documentation in relation to that certification process.
Okay. And along that line, we have another question that came in that says, we have a project that, James, you actually conducted the Energy Star certification on, and it's almost complete, but it's not done. I guess it's almost complete. How would we get the tax credits if we hadn't previously applied for them?
Well, if it meets the requirements, and there's going to be multiple people that are in this scenario where they've already been undergoing the Energy Star multifamily new construction certification. So there's the kind of application is really, again, that your tax filings once the building is complete. So in this scenario, yes, you should be able to claim this. And once the building is done and we issue the certificates, by then the IRS should have updated their tax codes, and you should be ready to go.
We'll take one last question, and that'll be we'll have to follow up with the rest of these questions, some really great questions afterwards, but really appreciate everybody hanging on here. The last question, I think, is the unit has to be occupied by the end of the calendar year to claim the credit for that year. I think there's a lot of questions about which year things apply to. But again, this is not a deduction. This is a credit. So, this is it's like a check being handed to you at the end of the project.
And it doesn't have to be occupied, because the certification is about the unit, not the occupation. So the way that the bill reads is when you acquire the units. So when the ownership acquires the units after the construction is complete, it is that year it is believed that you will be able to claim the credit on that year's tax filings.
And you know what? I know I said that there was the last question, but there's a really interesting one here. I think I want to squeeze in if we can, if it's not too bad, with so many people still on the line. This has to do with Florida. It says, it seems like warmer zone areas like South Florida would be cost prohibitive. Electric strip heating is the standard in the region. Are there any exceptions?
Yes, and this is where in your lower climate zones where it's much more cooling dominant, where you don't have to get into the heating, we do find that there is some ability to stick with the resistant strip heating. This goes back to contact us about your specific project and location, and we can provide the good solid guidance. But yes, we are seeing areas, Miami, Orlando, San Antonio, Phoenix, in these type of areas, there is a possibility to do the resistance strip heating, since it's so heavily dominated on the cooling part of the system and much less on the heating.
Okay. Well, James, I said that's the last question. I like to keep it that way, but I just got a text message from someone saying, please answer more questions. So we're going to take one more and that's it. This is the encore session. So is an assisted living facility considered a multifamily?
So assisted living, this is assisted living gets into a different occupancy classification. Now, independent living would be able to comply because their occupancy classification is the same as similar to the standard market rate multifamily. But assisted living and memory care, those are a different classification, and unfortunately, those will not comply under the current rule set. Now, there's always the potential and possibility for Energy Star to update their requirements to allow assisted living. And so certainly it's worth maybe sending a note to the EPA and say, hey, we want this product type to be able to get Energy Star certified.
All right. Well, James, we have to end at some point. So I apologize. We didn't get to everybody. So I think after that last notice of final encore, we started having some people drop off. So this is a great time to end. And James, what's the next step? How will you be following back up with those questions that we did not have a chance to get to?
Yes. In the next couple of days, we'll go through the list and we'll be responding directly to the people who asked them. We will try to identify and find a way to widely distribute the information, especially if we see that there's a common question being asked. Because if 3 people have asked the same question, then it's probably 30 to 300 people that have the question. So we will work to disseminate the information as widely as possible.
All right. Well, that's great, because I do think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here for our developers to take advantage of. And it's not often something like this comes along in our generation. This might be the biggest thing I've ever seen, that really helps the multifamily community. So, all right. Well, James, thank you. And thank you, Mike, for your time today. And thank you for everybody that attended the 45L tax presentation. And you'll be hearing back from James and Mike in the near future, next week, I guess, following up with all the questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.